about you, but I've seen a lot of negative ham radio content in my social media feeds lately. So I wanted to make a video today and tell you a positive story about my Elmer, Don, W1UPH. Now, before I get into the story, I want to ask you, if you've got a positive story about your Elmer or anything else in ham radio, I'd love to share it on my channel and keep this kind of as a regular series going forward. So if you've got something you'd like me to feature, send me an email or leave me a comment down below and we'll get your story on my channel. Hi, I'm Rob, N1NUG. I want to tell you a story about my ham radio Elmer. Now, if you're not familiar with ham radio, an Elmer is basically just an experienced person in ham radio that helps mentor you when you're first getting started out. Now, when I first got interested in ham radio, I was in my teens, and I had the good fortune of having what I'll call sort of two direct Elmers and one indirect Elmer. Now, the first Elmer I had was actually my dad. Now, he was never a licensed ham radio operator, but he was a shortwave listener, and a lot of what he listened to was ham radio stuff. So I kind of grew up listening to ham radio with my dad, and he encouraged me to go get my license and get involved in the hobby. But he wasn't a ham himself. Like I said, he never got licensed, and I kind of wish he had. But he's not who I want to talk about today. I want to talk about the person that was actually responsible for pushing me over the edge and actually convincing me to get my license. And that was W1UPH. His name was Don Johnson, and he lived in Hamden, Massachusetts. He's now a silent key. I think he passed away 10, maybe 15 years ago now. I don't remember exactly. But I met Don when I was in college. I went to Springfield Technical Community College in Springfield, Massachusetts, right after high school when I graduated in 1991. And Don was also attending Springfield Technical Community College in the same program I was, which was electrical engineering technology. Now, Don was quite a bit older than me at the time. He was in his early 50s, and he had gone back to school to get his associate's degree. Now, he'd been working as an electronics engineering technician for many years at a local electronics company, but, you know, as is the case, the company downsized and he ended up getting laid off. I think he was having trouble finding a new job. The economy wasn't that great at the time. So he went back to school to get his degree and try and show companies that not only did he have the industry experience, he had the knowledge to kind of do the work. And of course, we all had, you know, mostly the same classes together, and we got to talking and we became good friends. I found out that he, at the time, you know, was a licensed ham radio guy and had been for a long time. Extra class, knew, you know, the code, knew how to work on radios, and was a prominent figure in the local ham radio clubs of the area, the Mount Tom Amateur Radio Club and the Hamden County Radio Club. In fact, he might have been president of one or both at any given time. I'm not sure. I just know he was involved pretty heavily with ham radio. So, of course, as, you know, we were taking classes and got to know each other, you know, I told him I was kind of interested in ham radio too. I had been playing around with CB since I was in high school, and I had thought about, you know, getting my license. And when I was in high school, you needed Morse code to get your license, and I had started to study it, but it was kind of slow going for me because, you know, I was in high school, 15, 16, 17, and not completely focused on radio or Morse code or anything like that. But I was trying to practice. And then somewhere along the line, I don't remember if it was just before I was in college or just after, they came out with the no-code tech license. And at first I was a little apprehensive about that because even back then I knew what the stigma would be if I got my license and I didn't have Morse code. You know, nobody was going to respect me. But Don encouraged me to get the license. He said, don't worry about that. Just get on the license, get on the air, get your license, get on the air, meet people, talk to people. And when you have the time to learn the code, you'll learn it. Or maybe you won't. He said, it doesn't matter. He just was so encouraging about the whole thing. And he knew I had interest in electronics and you know, tinkering with radios and stuff like that. So he said there was no reason why I shouldn't at least get my license. So Don just kept bugging me and another guy that was kind of in the same boat as me, that was interested in electronics and radio. And he just kept encouraging us, not beating us over the head, just kept asking us, when are you going to get your license? What can I do to help? That kind of a thing. He would tell us when the tests were coming up, all of that sort of thing. And so, after continuing to talk to Don and hearing his stories and listening to the ham radio myself, he also encouraged me to listen, put in the local repeater into my scanner that I had and listen to the nightly nets or the weekly nets, that kind of thing, and just tune my ear into it and, get interested in getting on the radio. So it took Don a little while to convince me and Angel to go for our licenses. In fact, I think we went through the first year of college together, and I had talked about it with him, and we had kind of started to study a little bit here and there, but I wasn't super serious about it. But Don didn't let up. He kept asking me and Angel, when we were going to get our licenses. And so our second year of the program, we would go into the library to study our normal kind of coursework or do some of the homework. We would all go in together, me and Don and Angel and a few other guys. And we would, spend time in the library doing that. And then when those sessions were over, when we were done with our coursework, Don would pull us aside and say, hey, you want to cover a little bit of ham radio material while you're here? So we'd take, 15, 20 minutes more and go through some of the tests or test questions. We had the study book from the ARRL. And so we'd go through that, and Don would help us understand it. And of course, being in the electronics program, we had a pretty good handle on the electronics theory that was there. It was just kind of the rules and regulations, that kind of a thing we needed to, bone up on and memorize. So Don helped us with that. And over the course of a month or two, we were ready to take the test. And he set us up to go to the testing session for the Mount Tom Amateur Radio Club. They were, at the time, were doing testing sessions once a month on a Friday night. I forget, like fourth Friday of the month, something like that. And to this day, they're still doing it. In fact, I talked to the guy that ended up signing my original license a while ago, and now that I'm actually a VE, he was trying to get me to go help him out. And maybe I should one of these nights. I've got a little more time in my hands than I used to have. But anyway, all that aside, Angel and I went to the testing session, and I think Don was there to support us. I don't remember now. Maybe he wasn't. He might have had a conflict that night. But either way, we went to the testing session, we took the test, we got our licenses, and we got on the air. So then, after we got our licenses, Don still helped us. We would get on the air, and he would talk to us on the repeater and coach us on, good operating practices, that kind of a thing. And then, of course, he kept encouraging us to upgrade as well. But in those days, you needed Morse code to upgrade from no-code tech. You needed to learn, I think it was 5 words a minute to move on and get your general. Or maybe it was 5 words a minute to get the Tech Plus, I think is what the license class was. And then you needed 13 words a minute for general. And at the time, it was the last semester of college, so we were kind of busy with that. That's my excuse anyway. I didn't end up getting back into Morse code until later, 2003, I think, is when I taught myself Morse code, and I was able to upgrade to general back then. But I'm rambling and kind of getting too far ahead now at this point. So I guess what I'm trying to kind of impart to you about Don, W1UPH, is that he saw that spark of interest in both myself and Angel and made sure that he followed through and got us to get our licenses. And I haven't seen Angel since college, so I can't speak for him. But I can tell you that, ham radio, and obviously you know this if you've watched any of my videos, has been, a great hobby for me and has helped me out in many ways over the years. And if it wasn't for Don's persistence and encouragement and kind of positive coaching, I wouldn't be here today making a video talking to you about ham radio or probably anything. So even though he's a silent key, I want to thank Don and hope that he's looking down somewhere and smiling and seeing that ham radio is alive and well and thriving, partly because of him. So if you've got a positive story about your Elmer or anything in ham radio, I'd love to hear about it. Leave me a comment down below or send me an email if you'd like me to feature your story in an upcoming video. I'd love to have some content to kind of keep this series going so that we can spread positive messages about ham radio and show everybody what a cool hobby this is. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed the video. 7-3, and thanks for watching.